Welcome everybody to another Old World Behemoths hobby session. So today we're going to be going over oil washing. Now for many people, including myself, I always thought that oil washing was this really advanced technique that you often saw on videos coming out where people would whip out the oil paint and say, let's get it on there and do some pin line washing, and it always seemed very daunting in order to do. But I wanted to record a video to say that I have given it a go, and I think the results are going to tempt you into giving it a go. I have painted a whole dwarf army using this, and we're going to go through the steps today using a couple of test models. Quick shout out to our supporters who help us to run the channel, support us with software costs, and keep us moving on creating this content. So Death1942, Ghost, Joshua, Sick, and latest member Silver Dave, welcome and thank you for your ongoing support. Okay, the basic requirement is choosing the oil paint that you want to use. Now, I have a number of oil paints. I did go to the art store originally and invested in a Winsor & Newton Winton oil color ivory black, which you'll see in the video. This is a very high quality oil paint that you can pick up at your local art store. You can get them off Amazon as well, or eBay if you want as well, but I do recommend going and having a look at what's available. I also picked up on Amazon a broad range of oil paints from Meaden. Now, I got this for a much cheaper price, and I have to say that with the range of colors that it offers, I have not seen any difference in result to what a higher grade oil paint might get you. Now, that's not to say that there aren't any differences, but the aim of this video is really to give you that first touch at how to get into oil washing. And I'm not sponsored by any of these brands. I'm just saying that if you're looking for a single tone or different colors, don't worry about the brand itself. Now, I have heard that student grade oil paints are the ones to avoid because their pigment is not as strong as the artist or professional grades. I have not been able to test that. So if you just want to go into the art shop and get some paints, go and talk to the attendant, tell them what you're doing. They might be able to guide you. If you're happy investing the money, Winsor & Newton have some great brands. But to give you an indication of where to start, again, I didn't know where to start. Ivory black, there's a number of different names for the blacks, but ivory black typically is the all-rounder. So if you're used to washing with Null oil or any of the other brands, this is the one that you're probably going to start with, and it's the one that we're going to use in the videos. Other common colors, burnt umber, you'll see it's a reddish brown, very good for those warm tones. Payne's gray, surprisingly great color. It's a dark blue gray, but it's fantastic for bringing out those cooler tones. So your blues and your purples, even though there's a bit of warmer purple, if it's a lighter blue purple, make sure you're having it a Payne's gray application of it. So these are the three that I would definitely start with. Other things that you're going to require. So it is a bit of a messy process. It's not as simple as just getting your Null oil out or your acrylic wash and putting it onto the model. But there are advantages to putting the extra effort in. So you're going to need mineral spirits. Now, if you're in Australia, this is mineral turpentine. You can pick it up at the supermarket or your hardware store. You're going to need something to mix the paint pots, or the paint in. In this case, I've 3D printed out some little miniature paint pots. It can be whatever, little plastic containers, metal containers, something that's going to be there because you're going to, as you see, create a wash-like consistency in a container to be used. You're going to need a synthetic brush. Don't need to use anything expensive. I've used the craft brushes that my kids have from the $1 store. I've used $4 brushes from Officeworks. don't be concerned about it, but be aware that this process is going to damage the brush, so don't go all out and buy the expensive ones. As we go through the process, we're going to see that after we apply the oil wash, we're going to need something to take it off. In this case, I've used makeup wedge sponges. Just in the picture below, I got these off Amazon. You can also use many different variety of forms of Q-tips, but the advantage of things like the makeup wedge sponge is that they're not going to leave any strands of cotton like a Q-tip might, but it might be a bit more precise over the wedge, as you'll see. Okay, guys, so one last optional step, but it is recommended, is the use of varnishing. This was actually the main thing that added a lot of confusion to why I didn't want to start oil painting initially, but I realized quite quickly that it's not as daunting as you might first think. So effectively, once you've done your layers of paint, whether it's contrast or not, before we move to the oil wash stage, we want to make sure that we protect what we've done. And this is because when we use the mineral spirits at a later stage to remove the excess oil paint, if we use too much mineral spirits or we rub too hard with the makeup sponges, etc., we can actually end up taking away the paint that we've used as those base layers. So it is recommended to use a varnish. I would not recommend using a matte varnish because you want the capillary action of the satin or the gloss varnish. Now, my general use has been the Vallejo acrylic satin varnish. You can use any other brand. It's a mix between having enough surface tension to hold on to the oil wash, but not enough to allow it to go straight into the recesses. Now, the great thing about the satin varnish is that once we finish, we don't have to then use a matte varnish, unlike the gloss. So when we do use a gloss varnish, even after you've done the oil wash and removed it, you're still going to have that gloss effect. So you are going to have that added step of using a matte varnish later on if you do use that gloss. However, if you're looking for that absolute pin line style of oil painting where you don't want the under color to at all be tinted by the oil paint that's on top, then go for the gloss, because it's going to have so much less surface tension that very little of the oil wash is actually going to get into that paint layer. Okay, let's go on to the painting. So onto the models themselves. So we've got 3 models here. We've got a Marauder, which is going to showcase how to do skins, where you don't have that mass majority of metallic colors. There's some on there, there's some browns, some other colors, etc. But this model is really to showcase how oil washes go over speed paints, express paints, contrast paints, so you just whip together very quickly. The second model that I have is a all-metal dwarf. Now, again, I've used a rattle can here. If you watch some of my other videos, I kind of joked about the fact that it took me mere minutes to do these dwarves, which was a black undercoat spray, followed by lead belcher, followed by a silver spray to really make it bright. I then followed that up with some Vallejo brassy brass to give some gold effects, which at the moment you can't really see. It's just a big mass of metal colors, but once we apply that oil wash, it's going to add that definition that we're looking for. The final one is to showcase what the power of oil paints can do around adding different colors together to create more interesting visual effects on the armor, on cloth. So we're going for a very ethereal themed model. So we're going to start off with that Marauder. Now, as I said before, we're going to be using the Winton Ivory Black just as an all-rounder. Now, the purpose of this video as a reminder is basically just to showcase where's a great starting point. There are a lot of artists out there that you can go and have a look at around more advanced techniques, but this is literally the layman's application of oil washers, how to get your battle standard ready models very quickly up to speed and looking just that extra edge better. So we've added our black into the pot. Just put a blob in. Just be aggressive with it. Then we want to add some of those mineral spirits. So the consistency that we're trying to get here is a liquid wash. So the same that you would see in the Nuln oils of the world or whatever brand that you're using. Now, the range of using oil paints and the fact that we remove them later on means that you can actually have any type of consistency that you wish. As you can see here, I haven't quite gone thin enough, but you could actually use that. And it's quite an aggressive method, but you can put it on thick and take it off and you'll still have the same effect. But I like going for that really thinned down version for the capillary into those recesses over the satin varnish spray which we've applied to these models. Okay, now you can see that I've mixed it together. We're ensuring that we're going to get a consistency test here. Now, the layman's test is getting a bit of tissue, getting a bit of paper towel, and literally just blobbing it onto it to check if there's that capillary action. Yep, you can see it happening right there on it. So that's the wash consistency that we're going for in this way. Now, the importance of the satin varnish that I've applied is to ensure that we're not damaging any of the paint underneath. Now, as you can see, I'm actually just slopping it on. There's a very messy application here. Don't worry too much about having to be neat when applying this. Get as much paint as you're feeling comfortable with and be as aggressive as you wish. So I'm just slopping it around, making sure that it gets into those crevices. You'll see that it naturally goes into those crevices and begins to bring out that detail. Now, importantly, the only time that you're probably going to want to make sure that you're not applying it is into things like eye sockets as aggressively, because we want to have it applied en masse to the areas that we can scrape it off with the sponges or the applicators or the Q-tips, etc. What you don't want is to have it pooled into areas that you can't reach very quickly. And later on, I'll show you when I did this with a dwarf, where I've actually pulled it into the eyes a bit too much. So this model is actually okay because most of the time it's fine. And when you're looking from a tabletop height, you can generally see that you're just looking for that detail effect, and you can't see those really deep recesses that you've put it into. Now, with the dwarf, you can see here again that with that satin varnish, it's actually taken away a bit of that metal sheen. And what we're going to do here is bring that back up using the oil wash. So instantly, you can see that the oil wash consistency going into the recesses of the armor and starting to provide that detail. Now, the fun thing about, again, these oil washes is that you can do this in any color you wish. And I've done blues, I've done purples, I've done reds, I've done, as you can see in this example, blacks. They've all acted in that same way, but they're going to have a slightly different hue when left behind. But again, if you're looking for that grim, dark, metallic effect, this is a very simple way of achieving that. Now, I believe that even if you're not going for that grim, dark look, using oil paints on these bright metallics actually gives you quite a realistic, greasy look that a model in the Warhammer world may have. They might be cleaning their equipment, they may have been fighting, they might be polishing it, etc. But there's always going to be a bit of grime left over in the recesses on the armor as they're going through it. So okay, now we're moving on to the ethereal undead models. So here I am using a emerald green. Now I've gone for a green and a blue color here because they're very close together on the color wheel. I want the look to look that kind of magical. They've just risen from the dead and they're glowing with that undead energy look. But because blue and green are on so close together on the color wheel, it's not going to have this stark contrast effect as if I did an opposing color on the wheel. So it's still going to create that interest, but it's going to give me the flexibility to perhaps be a bit messy with the blues and the greens as I apply them. So here we are mixing up the green wash. You can see it's actually quite a nice and rich green when we apply it onto the model, but when you're just looking at it, it doesn't look that way. And this is the great thing about oil paints, is that when you see it here, it doesn't match what is on the model, but that's sometimes a surprising effect to these. And also another reason as to why you should experiment with other colors. So we've got the consistency that we need. We're just going to put this all over those cloth bits, which I've literally just used a gray dry brush over black to bring up. I've added a white dry brush on top of it. So this is the color that's actually going to be on to that. I've used a dark metallic color, which we're going to use the blue on later, because I think they're probably not having these really bright colors. But again, bringing in these colors allows you to tint them, not just apply the wash. Okay, now to change over the colors. Bit of tissue paper, get that oil wash out. Don't worry again. If we're leaving a bit of oil left behind, it's fine. It's only going to add to that color. Here's the Prussian blue. Now, for many people, a Prussian blue is actually quite striking blue. The pigment in it is very strong, which is the effect that we want. I want quite a strong blue on this model. But if we were using a acrylic wash, the immediate effect might be a bit of a shock. But again, because we're using oil washes, we're going to be bringing that back. So here we are, we're building that wash consistency one more time. Such a rich blue that we're able to apply. Okay, we've done the blob test. We're happy with the consistency and we're going to put it on. Again, I'm not that concerned if I get a bit of blue where the greens are, but we're going to put it on. See how strong the color is. Don't freak out. I learned very early that the application does not always meet the end result. Now, for those of you that did hold a bit of the black behind, if you've got multiple pots going, do feel free to throw in a bit of black here and there to perhaps blend and add some depth between the blues and the greens. But this, again, is really to showcase what's it going to look like if you just have a quick application of a couple of colors. If you wanted to use black on this model, you'll have quite a monochrome effect. You're not going to have as rich of colors, but by all means, give it a go, especially on that bone color. And there we have it. So that model is now done. There's blue and green applied all over the model. I'm just going to quickly take out the blue wash. I'm actually inside, so I don't want the turpentine smell hanging around just that too much, but it's good to just get it out as soon as you can. Here's a quick look at the model. You can see that everything's just been applied in a messy fashion, but not to worry, we'll be bringing it right down and getting that detail out. Here's a look at the Marauder. You can see that he's already starting to dry from the oil effect. He's nice and greasy, ready for the removal process. So guys, you want to leave these models to dry for at least 60 minutes, up to about the 3-hour mark. I would suggest you can go even further than that, but it's going to be easier just taking them off. Okay, so we've waited the couple of hours, time to let this dry. In this case, you can see that on the models, the oil paints, they're probably of the right consistency and drying stage now, where they look grimy, but not wet from still looking like an oil wash. So we're moving on to the cleaning stage here, where we're going to get the mineral spirits, put some into a container so that we can wipe off the excess paint that we want to use. Now, one of the key things to remember here is that you don't want to use too much mineral spirits, because you can end up taking off everything that you've done in the past. So probably less is more in that context. However, if you've left it for a longer period to dry, you are going to use more spirits to get that wash off. So here's the first model. We've got the Marauder. Dab a bit into the mineral spirits. You can see it being wiped off. Again, these are those sponges which we can just apply more broadly and just come down. So just there's no real secret sauce to this methodology. Just go along, wiping where you think is necessary. You want to take off most of the grime unless you're going for that really grim, dark look. But ultimately, you can just go at a high level and wipe down the most obvious surfaces that are here without worrying too much about going into the recesses of the model, because you want to keep that oil wash there. I would call him finished. Now, you can go through with a smaller sponge or Q-tip and actually soak up some of it, but when you look at the model on the tabletop zoomed out, it's actually going to have that definition and that bit of grime built into it. So I wouldn't worry too much about trying to go overboard on it. Now, metallic models are even easier because you just need to wipe down the top level surfaces. Now, as you can see here, I'm just literally doing the same methodology again. Nothing to it. You can see me just showcasing that some of that oil paint is coming off. With metals, in my experience, you do want to leave a bit of that greasy look, because whilst when you're doing the skin of the Marauder, it might look a bit strange to have all of this greasy look unless it's like a sooty, ashy environment. With the metal, it's not unfeasible for it to have a bunch of leftover dirt and grease that's been gathered up over time, a bit of rust, etc. And they just haven't gotten to cleaning it yet because it's constantly fighting. Now, it's also critical to remember that the models that you're seeing here, the oil paints are not fully dry. So once they dry, we'll have a slightly different look. Now we're onto our Undead model. So as you can see, there's a lot of blue on that armor. Now, it's going to come straight off, and we're looking for the effect about saying, okay, we just want to leave some of that blue in it without taking it out of the recesses, as we've discussed before. So again, using that methodology of just going at the broad level surfaces, Not looking for absolute minute detail here. Take most of it off. I don't mind if a bit of the blue's left over. It gives that a bit of an ethereal, magical armor effect. Now, once you get to this stage, you are going to want to let it dry. So oil paints do take a long time to dry, in some cases days, to really fully settle down. Now, when or if you're looking to go a step further than what we're seeing here and actually go towards applying highlights to this model, make sure you do wait at least a day to let the oil paints really settle in, so you don't accidentally activate them. You wouldn't want to be washing anymore, but if you wanted to here, you can always go and add more. So at this stage, if you thought I wanted to add a bit more black wash, grab your oil paints again and away you go. But otherwise, I'm quite happy with this look. It's fast, it's efficient. You're going to get some nice results using a very basic few steps that we've covered here today. Okay, we are at the end of this video. So quick recap. We started off by having a look at what are the basic needs. So the oil paints that you're going to need, those basic colors. We looked at the other items required, including the mineral spirits, the painting pots, the types of brushes that you're going to need, the removal sponges. In this case, we used a makeup wedge just off Amazon. We also covered the optional but recommended step of the acrylic varnish. Now, as a reminder, I used a satin varnish here, but by all means, you can still go that gloss varnish to get that capillary action, and then use a matte varnish to bring it right back down after you've finished. But the end result, as you can see here, these are the models after they've had a few days to really dry and come to a state that we can have a look at them and think, do we want to go a bit further? Do we want to add those highlights? I leave it up to you. So on the left-hand side, the Dwarf, all metal, we've used the black to basically just start to give us that detail. No other colors. If you wanted to have this, you can get away with Battle Ready at this step and just make sure that you give them a good base. We've got the Marauder on the right-hand side. Again, we use that ivory black to ensure we're giving definition to the muscles. At a tabletop height, you're going to see that definition without necessarily having that grimy effect. So we finish it off with the Undead model, an application of what, using no black, but just pure colors. And in this case, we use a dark emerald green and a Prussian blue, which are close together on the color wheel, to give us an effect which is subtle but visually appealing. So thank you for watching. Any feedback down below, let me know. I'm keen to explore oil washing in deeper ways. I want to play with more color. Let's try and get some more perhaps out there themes going. I am looking at painting up a demon army, so hopefully that will make an appearance with the oil washers. Until then, guys, take care.